So, I spent a lot of time over the weekend finally getting the PUB back on track. Basically, we have a whole new set of phases. Gonna go more in depth there. We have 3 different phase 4, 5 things. Defensive versions, very defensive version and offensive version. I'm gonna talk about that in a second. I'm gonna show you some gameplay first. What you're gonna see is roughly a phase 4. So nothing too crazy yet. If you quick look at the character, we got back our max res situation and took out a bunch of damage. So pretty standard tree, I would say, at a stage that's I'm pretty happy with. We are running 2120 Seismic already. And for gameplay, I know you guys like gameplay first, so we're gonna do a Drox, I figured. Like 25% more life Drox is not too bad. We're gonna have 30% less armor, so it's pretty standard, somewhat carefully rolled Drox, I would say, as a bossing thing. And I'm gonna show a Mesa for like normal mapping, I would say. Not gonna bore you until I'm at the end of the guys, so we're gonna teleport to Drox right now. Same map, just right at Drox, so it's gonna do this. It's probably not the worst example. I hope it's not the worst example. I hope we don't die to the additional physical damage things. So yeah, pretty standard bossing stuff. He's kind of dying, he's gonna phase pretty much already, I think. He is. Let's make sure we let him go into his phase. We prepare our trap stuff a bit. Did we curse him? Probably. Let's get some Wither on in. This is, by the way, not a bossing setup, right? I didn't bother for something like a Drox or whatever. I wouldn't go for like an extra bossing setup. I don't think it's necessary. You can just kill the dude. And if you're having trouble with it, it's always fine to go bossing, I think. And then he's kind of dead. Let's actually pick this up, and we're gonna go mapping. Also, just in case people are gonna complain, I'm just kidding, but honestly, this is a 5 link because this is peer support, and I have my Divergent Herald of Agony out, so I have a normal Herald of Agony, which means I have 85% poison chance instead of 100, and I have not allocated Curse Mastery. So I think that's probably enough damage on phase 4, just wanted to make a bit of a point there. And let's have a look at a pretty normal map. Weapon experience, in this case I'm actually gonna put in back my Herald of Agony, so we should have again 100% poison chance, where it is 105 actually, because it gets too much. But we are still running a 5 link, as you can see, since honestly after a ton of testing over the weekend, and I'm almost certain that getting a 6 link too early on this build is absolute bait. I never realized that before, to be fair. Maybe we actually get an expedition. Oh, there's an expedition here as well. That's perfect. Let's clean the area a bit. I'm gonna show the expedition, and then we're gonna talk about the POB. An actual like full build update. Probably gonna do one tomorrow or so. Shrines still on. Really like those. And let's see if we can actually make this somewhat big of an expedition. Fully specced into it, so we should get a bunch of monsters here if we find enough of these monster markers actually. Oh, they're the big ones. Okay, let's take them last. Let's see. Still same deal with expedition, to be fair. We just like waddle along, space out the traps, which is very important. You cannot throw too many traps. You have to trust in your traps to actually deal damage over time, and this still is a damage over time build, right? If you feel like there's too much build up, or you get to the end, you can also activate your buffs a bit, maybe focus even, and then all of them kind of die. Not looting now, just show some general mapping, how it feels if you go a bit faster. Like I already threw a seismic trap there, so I'm gonna leave the yellow dude alone. Just throw some more seismics, and then we kind of walk through there. That's basically max speed, I would say. I missed this guy, and apparently I missed this guy. So you need to be a bit careful that you're actually killing stuff. Get a feel for it. But yeah, that's I think enough of a showcase for a pretty much a phase 4 version of the build. Obviously for me right now I typically already run a 6-link, but that should prove you don't need a 6-link to farm T16s wonderfully. It's way cheaper to get spell suppression and all these kind of things and get to an actual phase 4 if you are fine with just having a 5-link, which is perfectly cool. You also don't need a Divergent Herald of Agony. If you don't have it, just take the Curse Mastery. It's good enough to have 85% in normal mapping unless you curse something, because you only curse things. You only need 100%, or you can only make use of 100% poison chance if the monster is big enough, and big enough monsters you're gonna curse anyway. So PUB update, enough gameplay for now. I had to almost rework essentially the entire PUB. So right now, how do I start about this? The entire notes section got completely reworked. I think it starts here. It starts here with the actual notes for the phases. They have way better notes now, I feel like. They have way more focused notes. They have less options, because I feel like that confused less experienced players, and more experienced players didn't need that many different options. So it's more or less a pretty straight do this exactly thing. I still kept the idea of, how do I explain this? Let's go to have actual phase 4, by the way. Then I can, this is already phase 4, this is fine. Of fixing certain attributes to certain items. So making sure people get all their attribute needs done with amulets and belts. So you're more free to fix up other items. I think the entire progression is still really good, or now it's way better again. It goes from, let's maybe show this with the tree real quick. It goes from actually chopping your swap. Ignore this on the left now. If you don't know how to use these things, by the way, you always choose like the same thing in each drop down. Like right now we're on trap swap here, so you would need to go and pick trap swap everywhere to get like useful information out of this whole thing, right? So essentially we're gonna look at phase 4, but yeah. So this is basically how we're gonna trap swap now. I already went basically this way. This is mainly from a Poisonous Concoction perspective. This is your starting tree. We start with the Curse Mastery and Whispers of Doom, which is probably the best way by now. Which I'm 100% not the only one that figured this out. We're gonna go into a phase 1. That basically means you're getting spell suppression capped already on your gear. This is gonna be wonky because I'm not gonna swap all the things. And then we're gonna pick up some of these trap throwing speed and some more life here. Phase 2 is incorporating already like Eldritch Battery, getting that going, but typically without Malevolence. Yeah, I don't really want to go Malevolence. Starting with, not yet Malevolence basically, starting with phase 3, you have the choice between going a defensive or an offensive part. Defensive means we already go down here, we give up a bunch of damage, which we really don't need. Let's maybe swap this stuff actually to phase 3. There's worth looking at the situation, I would say. Okay, perfect. So the defensive version focuses already down here, making it very comfy in my opinion, like very chill kind of playstyle thing. And the offensive version, which I don't recommend you go, is obviously less defensive, but has, if you compare these numbers here, it's a bit difficult with DPS, I know, on this build, but it got a bunch more damage. It essentially takes these nodes here and these nodes here. That's essentially the difference, which is a lot of damage difference. So if you then move towards let's say a phase 4 here, down here, you again have the choice between a defensive version, right? A very defensive, or basically defensive version still focuses on down here. It just has these nodes down here, still from a defense tree, and obviously rounds out the build up here. The very defensive version takes even less damage up here. It doesn't even take these nodes because it takes the full max res, and then these res nodes are better than these res nodes, I feel like. So it takes these life nodes here. So it takes the full blown, give me all the max res you can get kind of situation. And in terms of items on a phase 4, so we are like, just to show you that's not that expensive. It's obliteration still. Leper's Arm, it just fixes, with the Devouring Diadem, fixes together all your ES needs, which is wonderful, I believe. I really like that item. It even gives you some damage. On our chest piece here, this is Spell Suppression Live, and probably you're gonna need a double rest already here. But to be fair, phase 4 has only 5 links. You only need this to be a 5 link, right? And ideally already like a 2120 you can manage during that time. It still, on the tree, you can either take this node, Curse Mastery node, or get a Divergent Herald of Agony. That's up to you, your choice. So that's like the very defensive version. And the offensive version, obviously, it just doesn't care about this whole max res shebang. And if you feel like dying more, I don't recommend you do that. It just takes all the damage nodes, to be fair. It just takes all the damage nodes that are there. And obviously, that's gonna show in damage a lot. So regarding big numbers, because I get a lot of feedback that my numbers are not big enough, let's look at a phase 5 version. Maybe what is a phase 5 version? Phase 5 is quality on gems. There's not even an alternate quality in there, except for, obviously, we want Herald of Agony Divergent at this point, but everything else is just normal quality still. But with extra quality on it, 2120 gem. In terms of items, these are fancy items. Uniques stay exactly the same. This is like very fancy chest, but it's purely defensive. Except for the implicits, but your chest doesn't need to be that fancy to get the implicits. Got nothing to do with the chest craft. The gloves are also essentially just the implicits again, not too fancy. Here again, triple resist with a boring movement speed craft, and again, implicits, Eldritch implicits. Amulet is a bit more fancy. Get a +1 amulet with damage over time, something like that. Still allocates toxic strikes, obviously. Pretty basic unset ring, I would say. A bit specific, but easy to get. And we can swap off to a leather belt. We don't need a strength belt anymore. If you're not running the offensive version, if you're running the offensive version, but it's in the notes, you need to fix your strength somewhere else, right? So in terms of big numbers, so the trees here is going to start with the defensive one, and the items you've just seen, which are possible. In this case, it's a 6 link, obviously, by the way. It's a 6 links on phase 5. So we are on the setting for average traps and average waves actually hitting. And in terms of configuration, we are looking at a medium enemy. So this is like a Maven, like a small dude, right? So baseline, we're looking at 4.5 million roughly for defensive. Very defensive drops by 1 million. Offensive goes through the roof, essentially. So, as you know, it's always a bit weird with Seismic. So we're just going to turn on all the conditional stuff. We are, by the way, on Guardian Pinnacle. So if we actually use a bossing setup, right? Let's do the full bossing setup. We're going to change also our wand to Cold Iron Point, because that's what we're going to have. We're going to assume we have 15 Wither stacks, and it already gets pretty big. Then we're going to focus as well, and we're looking at like roughly at 12 million on defensive, right? Or whatever that means in actual gameplay, but that's what POB says. If you go to the very defense, we still have almost 10 million, and on the offensive, we're looking at 17 million for some reason, right? So yeah, so much about that. If you want to see even bigger numbers, you could go ahead and say, let's go like average wave hitting, right? And we're gonna say, okay, but we're not gonna have average amount of traps. We're gonna have 4 of them at the same time. So it's like our burst, I would say. Then you get even bigger numbers. Then on the defensive one, we're still focused on Withered, obviously. We get like 20 million. And very defensive, you still get 17 million. And on an offensive, you have a really big number with 25, right? If you want to make numbers even bigger, you could just assume it's a normal boss, and then we're looking at more numbers. Or we could assume, maybe, let's see, what does it say here? Oh yeah, the nucleus of the Maven, that's by the way huge. So you get like 36 million. So, I mean, there's a lot of buttons here you can press to make numbers really, really big. I don't really like that, but fair enough. I think the important one is focused and reverse stacks, because you can actually assume that. And I like going with average waves. and then keeping this at 1. Right, I think that's quite more realistic. Also, please take the defensive version. It's enough damage. It really is enough damage. So yeah, I hope this rework actually helps a lot. I hope I didn't make too many mistakes. That would be really, really bad. Some of the old videos are probably a bit outdated now, but I think this is going to help people a lot. I think the old version was already quite helpful. If you're looking for the Helix leveling, which I tried and is really bad now, don't level with Helix, or with the Elytrap leveling. Elytrap leveling is no longer part of this. I have to work it back in, but the nodes get so confusing that I feel like I will just have the Elytrap leveling back out in a different PUB. For now, in the dock is still the old PUB, but it's gonna stay unchanged. If you want to level with that still, then go over there and grab that just for leveling and then swap to the new PUB as needed. Cool. I hope this update helps. Bye.